The galaxy had known uneasy peace for 10 years. Two mighty powers, the Dravik Empire and the United Human Colonies, had signed a fragile treaty after decades of brutal wars. Many worlds rejoiced, but beneath the surface, tension still waited to explode. Both sides watched each other with careful eyes, ready to break the silence at the smallest spark. At the heart of the Dravik Empire was Princess Rhaenyra. She was not like ordinary rulers. She had grown up on the battlefield, raised with strict discipline, and taught to show no weakness. She was feared by her own people as much as she was respected. Leaders of other alien races spoke her name with caution, for she carried the pride of her empire. To the Dravik, she was a living symbol of strength. But strength had limits. In the middle of a Grand Council meeting, the princess had collapsed. Her body, once unshakable, burned with a sickness that no one understood. At first, her physicians believed it was a passing illness, but soon it spread through her veins like fire. Her body weakened each day, yet her spirit remained sharp. She would not admit defeat, even while coughing with pain. The Dravik court panicked. Their empire stood on the edge of chaos. If their princess died, their enemies would see weakness. If their enemies attacked, the peace treaty with humanity would shatter. Desperate to save her, the Dravik invited healers from across the galaxy. Specialists from distant star systems arrived with their finest medicines and machines. They brought strange technology, glowing cures, and grand promises. But one by one, they failed. The disease inside the princess was unlike anything they had seen. It resisted injections, destroyed chemicals, and even rejected advanced nanotech that could heal broken tissue in seconds. Every cure that touched her body was undone within hours. The alien physicians grew nervous, and many refused to return to her bedside. Some whispered that the sickness was not natural but a curse. Others believed it was the will of the stars, a punishment for her ruthless nature. Still, the Empire would not give up. Every failed attempt only deepened the fear across the galaxy. News of her illness spread like wildfire. In the human colonies, leaders watched closely. They knew that if the princess died, the Dravik generals would blame humanity. A war could begin before the next sunrise. The princess herself fought to keep her dignity. She would not cry before her court. She sat on her bed, her eyes blazing with anger even as her body trembled. Whenever a healer entered her chamber, she looked at them with such intensity that many turned away in fear. To her, fear was weakness, and weakness was unforgivable. She demanded respect even in her suffering. The palace halls grew quiet, almost like a tomb. Guards stood outside her door, their armor shining but their faces grim. Servants moved quickly, afraid to speak. Ministers whispered in corners, wondering if the empire would survive the loss of their symbol. Everyone knew the truth: if she died, peace would die with her. On the other side of the galaxy, in a human medical outpost, word reached a young medic named Daniel. He was not a soldier, not a general, not even a famous doctor. He was simply a field medic who had spent years treating injured miners and soldiers in remote colonies. He had no high reputation, yet his name was placed among the list of healers called to the Dravik court. When he heard of the princess's condition, he felt a strange pull in his heart. Others described her as vicious, terrifying, and impossible to approach. But Daniel thought of her not as a ruler or enemy, only as a patient in need. Without hesitation, he accepted the call. As he boarded the transport ship bound for the Dravik capital, many around him laughed. What could a simple human medic do where advanced alien doctors had failed? He had no great machines, no star-forged cures, only his bag of supplies and his quiet determination. Still, he carried himself with calm confidence. To him, healing was not only about technology but about understanding, patience, and courage. Back in the palace, the princess's fever burned higher. Her attendants wiped sweat from her brow, but her glare still carried strength. When told that yet another healer was on the way, she scoffed and whispered that she would drive him out like all the others. Yet deep inside, though she would never admit it, a flicker of fear touched her heart. For the first time, Princess Rhaenyra felt the shadow of death close around her. Across the stars, a quiet human medic was on his way to meet her. Neither Empire nor Council realized that the fragile line between war and peace rested not in the hands of generals or rulers, but in the calm steps of a healer who refused to turn away. The Dravik capital city was unlike anything Daniel had seen before. Towers of black stone and silver metal stretched into the sky, glowing faintly under the light of 3 moons. Massive banners carrying the royal crest of the Dravik Empire hung from the tallest spires. The streets below were quiet. Fear had settled across the empire like a heavy fog. Everyone knew their princess was dying, and everyone knew the fate of peace rested on her survival. When Daniel stepped off the transport ship, alien eyes followed him. Some were filled with doubt, others with open dislike. The Dravik were a proud people. To them, humans were young, reckless, and unworthy of standing in their great city. Soldiers in black armor watched him carefully as if expecting him to turn back at any moment. Daniel kept walking, carrying only his small medical bag. His steps were steady, not rushed, not hesitant. Inside the grand palace, the air was heavy with tension. Ministers gathered in the marble halls, speaking in low voices. Every day brought another failed attempt from yet another healer. The list of failures grew longer, and hope grew thinner. When news spread that the next healer was a human, many reacted with anger. "Have we fallen so low that we call a simple human to save our princess?" one minister shouted in the council chamber. "Humans are weak. Their science is primitive. He will only waste our time," another added. The royal physician bowed before the council and spoke carefully. "We have called the greatest doctors of a dozen worlds. None could cure her. Perhaps it is not power we need but another way of thinking. This human may fail, but even failure costs us nothing." The ministers grumbled, but none could argue. They had already tried everything. The human medic was summoned. Daniel entered the Grand Council chamber where alien leaders stood in a circle. He bowed respectfully but did not kneel. His voice was calm as he introduced himself. "My name is Daniel. I am a medic, not a great scientist. But I will do what I can." His plain words carried no pride, but also no fear. Some laughed under their breath. Others shook their heads. Yet one Dravik commander, an old warrior with scars across his face, leaned forward. He had seen countless battles and countless deaths. In Daniel's calm eyes, he recognized something unusual. The commander spoke. "Very well, human. You may see her. But if you fail, know that your name will vanish in shame." Daniel nodded. "I understand." The walk to the princess's chamber was long and silent. Guards lined the halls, their weapons gleaming. They looked at him with suspicion, yet he did not flinch. When he reached the heavy doors of her chamber, 2 guards crossed their spears. "Be warned," one of them said. "She does not tolerate weakness. Even her own healers fear her." "I am not here to fear her," Daniel replied simply. The doors opened with a deep echo. Inside, the room was dim, lit only by soft blue flames that burned in tall crystal lamps. At the center was the bed of the princess. She sat upright, though her body trembled with fever. Her eyes, sharp as blades, fixed on him the moment he entered. "You are the human they send me now." Her voice was low but carried the weight of command. "Yes," Daniel said. He did not lower his eyes. "I am here to help." She studied him for a long moment. Most who entered had bowed deeply, stammered, or avoided her gaze. This one did not. He stood calm, steady, and unshaken. She almost smiled, though her lips curved in bitterness. "You think you can do what others could not?" "I think I can try," Daniel replied. That is all any healer can promise. Her laughter was short and sharp, but it broke into a cough. He stepped closer and offered her water, but she pushed it away at first. When she saw he did not retreat, she allowed him to place it in her hand. She drank slowly, her gaze never leaving his. "Tell me, human," she said after a pause. "Do you fear me?" Daniel shook his head. "I see a patient who suffers. That is all." For the first time in weeks, silence filled the chamber without tension. The princess leaned back against the pillows, studying him with eyes that still carried fire. She was not used to being seen as anything other than a symbol of fear and power. This human's words unsettled her, but they also eased something deep within her heart. Outside the chamber, ministers and soldiers waited. Some expected to hear the human cry out in terror and run away. Others expected him to collapse under the pressure of her presence. But the minutes stretched into hours, and still he remained. Daniel opened his small medical kit and began his work. He took her pulse, checked her breathing, and wrote careful notes in his data pad. He asked her questions about her symptoms, and though she resisted at first, his calm persistence broke through her pride. When the guards finally peeked inside, they were shocked. The human medic sat quietly at her bedside, speaking softly while she listened. No healer before had lasted so long in her presence without trembling. For the first time, hope stirred in the hearts of those who watched. Perhaps this simple human truly carried something different. Not strength of arms, not wealth of knowledge, but the courage to sit without fear. The princess's chamber was a place where silence usually carried weight heavier than iron. No one dared to speak without her command, and no healer dared to look into her eyes. Yet when Daniel entered and remained steady under her gaze, the silence changed. It was no longer the silence of fear, but the silence of waiting. The princess studied him with sharp suspicion. Every healer before him had bowed too deeply, spoken too quickly, or hidden trembling hands. This human did none of that. He moved slowly, carefully, as if every action was chosen with patience. He placed his small medical bag on a table, opened it, and arranged the tools inside with quiet precision. The princess expected him to speak praise or beg her to allow treatment, but instead he simply worked, as if the presence of a ruler meant nothing. "Do you know who I am?" she asked finally, her voice heavy with both pride and exhaustion. "Yes," Daniel answered without looking up. "You are Princess Rhaenyra of the Dravic Empire. Then you should kneel when you speak to me." Daniel raised his eyes and met hers calmly. "I came here as a medic, not as a servant. I kneel for no patient, no matter their title. When I treat someone, I see them only as a life that must be saved." The words would have been dangerous from anyone else, but his tone was not filled with arrogance. It was simple truth, spoken with steady honesty. The princess blinked, taken aback. She had expected fear or flattery, but she received neither. "You speak boldly," she said. "I speak plainly," he replied. "Illness does not care about rank. It will take a queen as quickly as a farmer. I cannot heal you if I see you as a throne instead of a person." Her lips tightened, but no reply came. For the first time in weeks, she allowed a healer to touch her wrist. Daniel placed 2 fingers against her skin and counted her pulse. He closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the rhythm, then opened them and wrote something down. He asked her about her symptoms. At first, she refused to answer, staring at him with fire in her eyes. But when he repeated the questions with patient calm, she gave short replies. He noted each one without judgment. His attention was not on her crown or her reputation, but on the patterns of her sickness. Hours passed in this quiet exchange. Sometimes she snapped at him, telling him to leave her chamber. He did not leave. Sometimes she mocked him, saying that humans were fragile and unfit to heal Dravic royalty. He did not argue. He only continued to work, taking measurements, recording details, and offering water when she coughed. Finally, she asked a question of her own. "Why do you not fear me, human?" Daniel looked at her with calm eyes. "Because fear does not help healing. I see suffering, not power. I sit beside soldiers bleeding on battlefields. I sit beside children sick with fevers. I sit beside you now. Fear has no place here." Her gaze lingered on him longer than before. His words stirred something she did not understand. For her whole life, others had feared her strength. They bowed not because of respect, but because of terror. Yet this human sat beside her as if she were no more dangerous than a tired traveler needing rest. The guards outside shifted uneasily. They expected the human to run out screaming or to be thrown from the chamber. Instead, when the door opened briefly, they saw him quietly adjusting a blanket over the princess's shoulders while she allowed it. No one could believe it. The royal physician, watching from a distance, whispered to the council ministers. "This human does not fight her pride. He ignores it. That may be why she allows him near." As the evening deepened, Daniel finished his first long observation. He placed his tools back in his bag and stood. The princess frowned. "You are leaving already?" "I will return tomorrow," he said. "I have learned much today, but healing takes time. Rest now." Her pride wanted to command him to stay, to prove that she still held authority. But a strange feeling stopped her. For the first time since her sickness began, she felt a sliver of peace. His presence did not weaken her pride, but softened the weight of her suffering. Against her own will, she allowed him to leave. When Daniel stepped out of the chamber, the council members stared at him in disbelief. Some whispered that perhaps the human was only lucky. Others wondered if his calm nature carried some hidden trick. The old commander who had allowed Daniel into the palace simply nodded. "He is not like the others," he said. Daniel walked through the palace corridors with the same steady steps he had carried upon arrival. He had seen her strength, her pride, and her suffering. He had seen the sharp fire in her eyes and the fragile sickness in her body. He knew the path would not be easy, but he also knew he had taken the first true step toward healing. And somewhere deep in her chamber, Princess Rhaenyra lay awake. She thought of the human who dared to look into her eyes without trembling. For the first time, she wondered if her fate might not be sealed after all. The next day came quietly. The palace was filled with whispers about the human medic who had stayed in the princess's chamber without trembling. Many did not believe it. They said it was a lie, a trick told by guards to hide another failure. But when Daniel returned to the princess's chamber carrying the same small medical bag, every doubt began to fall silent. Inside the chamber, Princess Rhaenyra sat upright in her bed. Her face was pale, but her eyes carried the same fire. She watched him as he entered, expecting him to look away. He did not. He walked forward with the same calm steps, bowed his head slightly in greeting, and set his bag down beside her bed. "You returned," she said. Her tone was sharp, but behind it was a hint of surprise. "I said I would," Daniel replied. "A healer must keep his word." Rhaenyra tilted her head, as if trying to find weakness in his steady voice. When she found none, she leaned back against her pillows and closed her eyes. "Do as you wish, human. I will not stop you." Daniel opened his kit and began his work. He checked her temperature, her breathing, and her pulse. His hands moved with patience, never rushing. He wrote notes on his datapad, marking each small detail. The princess did not speak much at first. She sat in silence, watching him through half-closed eyes. Hours passed like this. The chamber, once a place filled with tension and harsh words, was now filled with a quiet rhythm. The sound of his tools, the scratch of his notes, and the steady breathing of the princess blended into a calm atmosphere. The silence was not heavy anymore. It was gentle, almost restful. At one point, she coughed violently, and her body shook with pain. Without hesitation, Daniel poured water into a cup and offered it to her. She refused at first, her pride telling her not to accept help. But when he held it steadily without a word, she finally took it. She drank slowly, and for the first time, her thanks came not through words but through silence. Later, he adjusted her blanket when he saw her shiver. Again, she resisted at first, but she did not push it away. The smallest acts of care were breaking through walls that no other healer had touched. Finally, Rhaenyra spoke. "Why do you not fill the silence with words? Like the others, they begged me to listen to their cures. They tried to impress me with their knowledge. You do nothing of that sort." Daniel looked at her calmly. "Because healing is not about showing my knowledge. It is about understanding the patient. Sometimes silence tells me more than words. When you rest, I learn. When you cough, I learn. When you breathe, I learn. If I speak too much, I might miss what your body is already saying." Her eyes narrowed, but not in anger. It was curiosity. "You think my body speaks?" "Yes," Daniel said softly. "Every body does. A healer's task is to listen." She said nothing more. But deep inside, she felt something stir. For years she had been seen as a symbol, a ruler, a warrior. No one had ever spoken to her as if she were simply a living being, a patient whose body had a story to tell. As the day stretched into night, the quiet hours continued. Daniel remained by her side, sometimes writing, sometimes sitting still. He did not rush to leave, nor did he force conversation. His steady presence became like a wall against the fear that had been creeping into her heart since her illness began. Outside the chamber, the guards noticed the difference. They whispered among themselves. "Do you hear that? It is quiet in there. She does not shout. She does not order him to leave." Another guard replied, "Perhaps the human has found some trick." But when they opened the door slightly, they saw no trick. They saw a man sitting calmly beside their princess, and a princess who allowed it. The royal physician, watching from afar, grew thoughtful. The human strength is not in his medicine. It is in his patience. He does not fight her pride. He lets it rest. At midnight, Daniel finally stood. "You should sleep," he said quietly. Rhaenyra frowned. "I do not sleep easily." "Then close your eyes," he answered, "and let the silence carry you. Tomorrow, I will return." For a long moment, she stared at him. Her pride told her to command him to stay, to prove she still held control. But her heart told her something else. His presence had given her more peace than she had felt since her sickness began. She gave a small nod, almost too small to notice. Daniel packed his tools, bowed slightly, and left the chamber. When the doors closed behind him, the princess lay back in her bed. The silence remained, but it was no longer empty. It carried the memory of calm hands and steady words. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in weeks, she drifted into sleep without fear. In the halls of the palace, rumors grew stronger. Ministers whispered that the human was changing something within the chamber. Guards reported that she no longer raged in the night. The empire waited, unsure what this strange shift meant. But Daniel knew one truth as he walked back to his quarters. Healing did not begin with cures. Healing began with trust. And in those silent hours, trust had taken its first breath. Days turned into a slow rhythm inside the royal chamber. Daniel came each morning carrying his small medical kit. He would sit by the princess, study her breathing, take her pulse, and note down every detail. He never rushed. He never raised his voice. Where other healers had tried to command or impress, Daniel only offered patience. At first, Princess Rhaenyra resisted. She spoke little, and when she did, her words were sharp. She reminded him that she was ruler of the Dravik, not a fragile patient to be pitied. But no matter how strong her words were, Daniel answered with calm honesty. He did not treat her like a queen, nor like a warrior. He treated her like a human would treat another human, with respect but without fear. One evening, as he finished checking her temperature, Rhaenyra asked, "Why do you care so much for healing? Why do you not seek power or glory like others of your kind?" Daniel placed his tools back in the kit before answering. "I was trained as a field medic during the colony wars. I saw men and women fall in battle, and I learned that no matter how great or small they were, every life mattered the same when pain came. A soldier, a miner, a child, a ruler. The body does not care about titles. It only seeks care." The princess looked at him for a long moment. His words carried no hidden motive. They were simple, plain truths. For someone raised in a court where every word was wrapped in politics, his honesty was strange, almost unsettling. The next day, when Daniel entered the chamber, he did not bring only tools. He brought stories. As he checked her breathing and pulse, he spoke of his home. He told her about Earth, with its blue oceans, green forests, and stormy skies. He spoke of the history of his people, of wars that nearly destroyed them, and of peace they built afterward through patience and learning. Rhaenyra listened in silence at first. She thought the tales of humans sounded almost weak. They were not born with armor like the Dravik. They were not raised to fight from childhood. Yet as Daniel continued, she saw a different kind of strength. Humans were fragile, yet they survived disasters. They lacked natural weapons, yet they built tools and medicines. They had faced hunger, sickness, and endless wars, yet they always rose again. "You humans are strange," she said one evening. "You are not the strongest. You are not the fastest. Yet you endure." Daniel smiled faintly. "That is our way. We learn, we adapt, and we keep moving forward. It is not strength of body that saves us, but strength of will." Her sharp eyes softened for a moment. "Perhaps that is why you do not tremble before me." He did not answer with pride. He simply said, "I do not see you as someone to fear. I see you as someone who wants to live." Each day after that, she allowed him to stay longer. She asked him more about his people. He spoke of simple herbs that once cured deadly fevers. He spoke of nurses who walked through villages risking their lives to heal the sick. He spoke of mothers who stayed awake all night caring for children with nothing but wet cloths and hope. The princess, who had been raised among warriors and commanders, had never heard such stories. To her, strength meant holding a blade, commanding soldiers, or facing death without flinching. But here was another strength, quiet and steady, shown not through power but through care. One evening, as the moons of the Dravik world shone through the tall windows, Rhaenyra asked softly, "Do you believe I can be healed?" Daniel met her gaze without hesitation. "Yes. But not only with medicine. Healing begins when you stop fighting yourself. Your body needs peace as much as it needs cures." She frowned. "Peace is weakness." "No," he said gently. "Peace is strength. It is what keeps you alive after the battle ends." Her chest rose and fell as she thought about his words. For years, she had lived believing that strength meant never lowering her guard. Yet here was a human who showed strength not through weapons, but through calm patience. The guards outside noticed the change too. They no longer heard harsh coughing followed by angry shouts. Instead, they heard quiet conversations, sometimes even the sound of the princess's low laughter. Rumors spread quickly. The vicious princess, who once drove healers away with her glare, now allowed a human medic to sit at her side. The council grew restless. Some believed the human was using tricks. Others feared he was gaining influence over her. But the old commander, the one with scars across his face, shook his head. "No trick. The human is showing her something none of us could. He is showing her the human way." And within her chamber, Princess Rhaenyra felt that truth. For the first time in her life, she did not feel alone in her suffering. A fragile human had shown her a path she had never seen. Not the path of pride or power, but the path of healing through patience, compassion, and courage. Weeks passed, and the princess's chamber became a place of quiet change. Daniel continued his daily visits, never once missing a morning. He carried the same small bag, filled with simple tools and medicines, but more than that, he carried patience. Each day he learned more about her illness. Each day he understood her body's silent story a little better. The princess, once unwilling to answer even the smallest question, now spoke freely about her pain. She described the sharp waves of fever, the strange weakness in her chest, and the way her body rejected every cure. Daniel listened to everything carefully, writing notes with steady hands. His eyes carried no frustration when her answers were unclear. Instead, they carried determination. One evening, as the moons cast pale light across the chamber, Daniel reviewed all he had learned. The disease was not a simple infection. It behaved differently from anything he had seen before. Alien doctors had tried advanced machines and strong chemicals, yet nothing worked. Daniel realized it was not only the sickness itself but also how the princess's body reacted. Her stress, her pride, and her constant tension seemed to feed the illness. He thought about the lessons of human history. Long ago, before advanced medicine, humans had faced plagues and unknown diseases. Many cures were discovered not through power but through patience, herbs, rest, and calm care. He remembered stories of healers who spent nights beside patients, keeping them alive with nothing more than clean water and steady hope. The next morning, Daniel entered the chamber carrying a small mix of herbs collected from the palace gardens. The Dravik attendants looked at him with disbelief. "What are you doing with weeds?" one of them asked. "They are not weeds," Daniel replied calmly. "They are medicine, if used with care." Inside, he explained his plan to the princess. "Your body rejects the heavy cures because it sees them as threats. We will use something smaller, gentler. We will not fight the sickness with force. We will weaken it slowly until your body can rise against it." Rhaenyra raised an eyebrow. "And you think simple herbs will do what alien science could not?" "I think your body must be allowed to heal instead of being attacked," Daniel said. "The treatment must work with you, not against you." She studied him for a long time before nodding. "Do what you must. But if you fail, know that you stood closer to me than anyone else dared." Daniel prepared the mixture carefully. He boiled water, added the herbs, and poured the liquid into a cup. Its smell was bitter, but he held it out without hesitation. The princess took it in her hands and drank slowly. Her face tightened at the taste, but she did not stop. For the next days, Daniel repeated the treatment. Alongside the herbs, he encouraged her to rest properly, to let go of constant tension, and to breathe deeply. At first, she resisted. She was not used to resting, not used to lowering her guard. But his calm presence guided her. When she coughed through the night, he sat beside her. When she grew restless, he spoke softly of Earth, of how fragile humans survived storms, hunger, and sickness by refusing to surrender. Slowly, changes began to show. The fevers that once burned without end started to lessen. Her strength, once fading each day, began to return in small amounts. She could stand for a short while without trembling. Her eyes, though still sharp, no longer carried the shadow of pain. The attendants whispered in disbelief. They had seen countless healers fail, yet now they watched the princess recover under the care of a human with nothing more than patience, herbs, and quiet courage. The council, at first doubtful, began to see hope. One night, when Daniel was preparing his notes, Rhaenyra spoke quietly. "You were right. It was not only the sickness. It was me. I fought it too fiercely, and my body broke under the weight." Daniel looked at her with a faint smile. A warrior's strength is to fight. A healer's strength is to know when to let go. You learned both. She was silent for a while before adding, "No one has ever spoken to me this way. Not even my own people." "Perhaps they only see a princess," Daniel replied. "I see a patient who wants to live. And now, I see someone who will live." Her gaze softened, though pride still burned within her. But for the first time, she felt that her pride and her healing no longer fought each other. They worked together. As days turned into weeks, the sickness weakened further. The herbs, the rest, and the steady presence of the human medic had done what advanced alien science could not. The so-called curse was breaking. In the council chamber, ministers argued over what this meant. Some said the human had brought strange magic. Others believed he had discovered a hidden science. But the scarred commander simply spoke, "He broke no curse. He only showed her how to live again." And inside the chamber, Princess Rhaenyra knew the truth. She was not healed by power, but by patience. Not by machines, but by trust. And at the center of it all was a human who never once looked at her with fear. Princess Rhaenyra's recovery became the talk of the Dravic Empire. Word spread quickly through the palace halls, across the cities, and into the farthest colonies. No one had expected the human medic to succeed. Many doubted him at first, yet now the empire witnessed a miracle. The princess, once fevered and frail, now moved with strength, her sharp eyes clear, her voice steady, and her pride intact. The council convened to discuss the matter. Ministers, generals, and royal advisors crowded the great hall. Some praised Daniel openly. Others questioned why a human had been allowed to sit beside the princess in the first place. The scarred commander, who had first welcomed Daniel into the palace, spoke before any others could argue. "He is no magician, no warrior, and no ruler," the commander said. "Yet he has done what our greatest scientists could not. He has healed her not with fear, not with power, but with patience and courage. That is strength we cannot ignore." The ministers exchanged uneasy glances. Some feared the influence Daniel might hold over the princess. Others understood that this human had shown something far more valuable than influence. He had shown respect for life itself. In the princess's chamber, Daniel continued his routine, though his work now required less. Her strength had returned. She could stand for long hours, walk across the chamber, and speak with clarity. Yet the bond that had formed over weeks of care remained. She had learned to trust him. She had learned to respect the human way, which was different from anything in the Dravic Empire. One morning, she invited him to sit closer. "Daniel," she said softly, "you have done more than heal my body. You have shown me a way to calm my mind. You have shown me that strength is not only in power but in understanding. I owe you more than I can say." Daniel looked at her calmly, a faint smile on his lips. "I only did what I could. You allowed me to be here. That made all the difference." The princess considered his words carefully. She realized that her empire, and indeed the galaxy, would see human strength in a new light. Humans were often underestimated. Their bodies were not as strong as the Dravic, their weapons not as advanced. Yet here was proof that courage, patience, and compassion could accomplish what machines and armies could not. The council chamber grew quiet as the princess made her next announcement. "I was healed by a human medic," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "Not by fear, not by commands, but by one who sat beside me without trembling. This human showed me courage that rivals any warrior. He deserves our respect." Gasps filled the room. Ministers whispered among themselves. Some could not believe the princess, so proud and strong, would give such recognition to a human. Yet the scarred commander nodded with understanding. He had witnessed it all and knew the truth. The news reached the united human colonies quickly. Leaders, scholars, and citizens alike celebrated. The human who had quietly walked among the stars, treating patients and soldiers with care, had healed a powerful alien princess and brought new hope to the galaxy. The story spread not as a tale of war or victory, but as a tale of humanity's quiet strength. Rhaenyra herself grew stronger with each day. Her council no longer questioned her decisions, for she ruled with renewed clarity. Yet she remembered the lessons learned beside the human medic. Strength was not only in commanding armies or enforcing power. Strength was in courage without fear, patience without complaint, and the willingness to care for another life. One evening, she spoke directly to Daniel. "I am no longer afraid of weakness," she said. "Because you have shown me that weakness is not surrender. Weakness can become strength when paired with courage and understanding." Daniel nodded. "That is the human way. We survive because we do not give up. We heal because we care. And we endure because we hope." Across the stars, the story of the human medic spread. Children heard it in classrooms, soldiers in training camps shared it as inspiration, and leaders discussed it as proof that humans could rise in ways the galaxy had not imagined. A single human had changed the perception of an entire species. In the palace, Princess Rhaenyra stood beside Daniel as she addressed the Empire. "This human has shown me that courage is not only for warriors, that healing is not only for science, and that peace is not only for treaties. Respect is earned through care, not fear." The halls erupted with quiet applause. For the first time, humans were seen not only as allies or outsiders but as a people capable of extraordinary strength. Not through weapons or machines, but through heart and mind. And Daniel, the quiet human medic, remained humble. He had done what any healer would do, he had cared, observed, and endured. Yet in doing so, he had changed a princess, an empire, and the galaxy's view of humanity forever. Princess Rhaenyra's recovery was complete. Her empire remained at peace, now strengthened not only by treaties but by respect for the courage and compassion of a human. The galaxy learned a lesson that day: true strength is not only in power but in the willingness to act without fear, to heal without expectation, and to believe in life when it is most fragile.